Frantz Fanon, a name synonymous with revolution, anti-colonialism, and the fight for Black liberation. Born in 1925 on the Caribbean island of Martinique, Fanon's life was shaped by French colonialism. This oppressive system ignited a fire in his soul to dismantle the structures of power. From psychiatrist to revolutionary thinker, Fanon challenged colonialism and racism. His passion for justice manifested in groundbreaking writings and activism. Fanon understood the profound psychological damage inflicted by colonialism. He pursued psychiatry to heal the mental scars left by colonial rule. Fanon's experiences as a Black man in France inspired his early work. Black Skin, White Masks. Published in 1953, it explored the psychological complexities of race and racism. Fanon delved into how Black individuals internalize negative stereotypes, leading to self-doubt and shame. He argued this internalized racism perpetuated oppression. Fanon's analysis challenged narratives, attributing racial inequality solely to economic or social factors. He exposed the deep psychological wounds inflicted by racism. His work resonated deeply with those experiencing racism firsthand. Black Skin, White Masks became a cornerstone of anti-colonial and Black liberation movements. It inspired generations to challenge racial injustice and fight for equality. Fanon's most influential work, The Wretched of the Earth, was published in 1961. It provided a searing indictment of colonialism, exposing its inherent violence and brutality. Fanon argued that colonialism was a system of exploitation, relying on violence. He explored the psychological effects on both the colonized and the colonizer. Colonialism created a Manichaean world, dividing people into colonizer and colonized. Despite dehumanization, the colonized possessed dignity and capacity for resistance. The struggle for liberation was a psychological imperative to reclaim humanity. The Wretched of the Earth became a manifesto for anti-colonial movements worldwide. Fanon's life mirrored the struggle he articulated in his writings. He moved to Algeria in 1953 to work as a psychiatrist. Algeria was in a war of independence against French colonial rule. Treating both sides exposed him to the conflict's brutality. He joined the Algerian National Liberation Front in 1954. Fanon advocated for Algerian independence internationally. The French government saw him as a dangerous subversive. Expelled in 1957, he continued his work in Tunisia. In The Wretched of the Earth, Frantz Fanon exposes the brutal realities of colonialism and its far-reaching consequences. He paints a vivid picture of a world sharply divided, where the colonizer and the colonized exist as two distinct and unequal entities. The colonizer imposes their will upon the colonized, stripping them of their land, culture, and humanity. Colonization, Fanon argues, is a deeply psychological endeavor. It subjugates not just the bodies, but also the minds and spirits of the colonized. This system of oppression is built on a foundation of violence. The colonizer maintains dominance through brute force and control over legal and economic systems. This violence permeates every aspect of life in the colonized world. Fanon argues that the colonized world is starkly divided. The colonized are relegated to a life of poverty, marginalization, and despair. Fanon dissects the mechanisms employed by the colonizer to maintain power. Colonialism relies on interconnected systems to control the colonized population. One insidious tool is the manipulation of language and culture. The colonizer imposes their language, suppressing indigenous traditions. This alienates the colonized from their heritage, forcing assimilation. Education becomes a weapon of colonial control. Schools indoctrinate students with the colonizer's values, erasing the colonized culture. This perpetuates colonialism, creating generations who accept colonial rule. Legal and economic systems serve the colonizer's interests. Laws target the colonized, while economic policies benefit the colonizer. This exploitation traps the colonized in poverty, solidifying colonial power. Media controlled by the colonizer shapes public opinion. Media portrays the colonizer as civilized, the colonized as incapable. This propaganda justifies the colonizer's actions and quells dissent. Fanon's analysis of colonialism extends beyond the political and economic realms, delving into the profound psychological impact of colonial subjugation. He argues that the constant dehumanization and oppression inflicted upon the colonized have devastating consequences for their mental and emotional well-being. The colonized individual, bombarded with messages of their own inferiority, begins to internalize these messages, leading to feelings of self-doubt, shame, and a diminished sense of self-worth. This internalized oppression, Fanon argues, is one of the most insidious consequences of colonialism. It creates a psychological prison that can be far more difficult to escape than any physical chains. The colonized, conditioned to believe in their own inferiority, may struggle to envision a future free from colonial rule, accepting their subjugation as an inevitable fact of life. Fanon highlights the psychological toll of living in a constant state of fear and uncertainty. The threat of violence, both physical and psychological, looms large over the lives of the colonized. This constant fear can lead to feelings of anxiety, paranoia, and a sense of hopelessness. Furthermore, the colonized are often denied access to mental health care and support systems, leaving them to cope with the trauma of colonialism on their own. Despite the devastating psychological impact of colonialism, Fanon also recognized the resilience of the human spirit. He argued that the colonized, even in the face of overwhelming oppression, possess an innate capacity for resistance and a deep desire for liberation. Section 4. The Call for Decolonization. For Fanon, decolonization was a transformative act of reclaiming one's humanity. It required dismantling both physical structures and psychological chains. A call to reject imposed inferiority and assert inherent dignity. Fanon envisioned a new national consciousness, transcending colonial divisions. True liberation required a united front against oppression. The path to decolonization was fraught with challenges. The colonizer would not relinquish power easily. Fanon urged newly independent nations to create societies based on justice and equality. His call for decolonization resonated deeply worldwide. Fanon's work remains relevant today, shedding light on ongoing struggles. His call for decolonization serves as a powerful reminder of the need for both systemic dismantling and psychological healing. The masks we wear. Unmasking Racial Identity. Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Masks explores racial identity in a society built on white supremacy. He argues race is a social construct used to categorize and stratify individuals. This categorization shapes lived experiences and power dynamics. Fanon contends Black individuals often view themselves through the white gaze. This gaze imposes a sense of otherness and not belonging. Fanon introduces the concept of the mask. Black individuals develop masks to navigate a hostile world. These masks come at a cost, requiring suppression of true selves. This internal conflict takes a heavy toll on the Black psyche. Fanon explores the collective impact of racism on the Black community. Constant dehumanization creates a sense of collective trauma. This shared experience of oppression becomes a source of strength. Fanon recognized dismantling white supremacy required collective effort. True liberation could only be achieved through collective self-affirmation. Reclaiming Black identity on Black people's own terms is essential. Internalized oppression. The colonization of the mind. Fanon's concept of internalized oppression is significant in understanding racism. Negative stereotypes lead Black individuals to internalize dehumanizing messages. They see themselves through the eyes of the oppressor. This internalized oppression manifests as self-doubt and self-hatred. It can lead to a desire to emulate whiteness. This internalization perpetuates the cycle of oppression. Lack of positive representation exacerbates this struggle. Dominant narratives portray Blackness negatively. Overcoming internalized oppression requires radical self-love. Black individuals must reject negative images and embrace their Blackness. Self-reclamation is essential for individual and collective liberation. Freeing themselves from mental chains is crucial. Only then can Black people challenge and dismantle white supremacy. Fanon explores the psychological impact of racism through the white gaze. The white gaze shapes how Black individuals perceive themselves. It reinforces the supposed superiority of whiteness. The white gaze is a powerful tool of subjugation. It objectifies Black bodies and denies their humanity. The white gaze defines Blackness on its own terms. Black individuals feel hypervisible and invisible simultaneously. Their race overshadows all other characteristics. Their individuality is erased. Their voices and experiences are often ignored. Their humanity is rendered invisible. The white gaze sees them as objects to be controlled. Despite the psychological violence, Fanon believed in resistance. Liberation is a personal and psychological journey. Reclaiming one's Blackness is essential. Rejecting the white gaze is necessary. Seeing oneself through a different lens is crucial. Art and literature play a vital role in self-reclamation. Creative outlets challenge dominant narratives. A new Black identity is rooted in self-love and respect. Fanon's call to action resonates today. The fight against racism includes healing psychological wounds. It is a fight for mental liberation. Creating a world where all are free to be authentic is the goal. Colonialism was a form of psychological warfare. It aimed to instill a sense of inferiority in the colonized. Constant dehumanization left deep scars on the psyche. Colonialism assaulted identity. Indigenous cultures were denigrated. The colonized felt ashamed of their heritage. This led to a sense of alienation. Economic exploitation under colonialism had psychological impacts. The colonized were trapped in poverty and dependence. This created hopelessness and despair. The colonized felt powerless. Constant surveillance took a toll on mental well-being. The colonizers' gaze created anxiety and paranoia. The colonized lived in fear of reprisal. The oppressor's burden. A Twisted Psyche. Fanon analyzed the psyche of the colonizer. Colonialism was driven by insecurity and fear. The colonizer feared the colonized. They constructed narratives of superiority. This self-deception came at a cost. The colonizer lived in denial. They repressed guilt and shame. This led to a warped sense of reality. The colonizer dehumanized the colonized. This was essential to maintain their sense of self-worth. Breaking the chains. The struggle for mental liberation. Decolonization required dismantling psychological structures. Mental decolonization was essential. The colonized needed to reclaim their history and identity. Rejecting the colonizers' narratives was crucial. Education played a crucial role. A new education system would empower the colonized. It would celebrate diversity and promote self-reliance. Collective action was important for mental liberation. Sharing experiences and supporting one another was key. The struggle for liberation was a collective endeavor. Solidarity and unity of purpose were essential. Healing the wounds towards a decolonized mind. Fanon envisioned a world free from psychological scars of colonialism. This new world would be characterized by mutual respect. Healing from colonial trauma would be long and arduous. Confronting painful truths was necessary. Art and literature played a role in healing. Creative outlets expressed pain and resilience. Fanon's work offers a framework for understanding colonialism's legacy. True freedom requires dismantling mental chains. A decolonized mind is free from racism and oppression. Frantz Fanon's ideas continue to inspire globally. His work resonates with those affected by colonialism and racism. Fanon's writings inspired African independence movements. Leaders like Kwame Nkrumah embraced his ideas. His influence extended to the Americas, Asia, and Europe. The Black Power movement in the U.S. drew from his work. His analysis resonated with marginalized communities worldwide. Fanon's work transcended geographical boundaries. His ideas sparked debates and ignited imaginations. He forced the world to confront colonialism and racism. Fanon helped shape a new global consciousness. Fanon's work laid the foundation for the field of post-colonial studies, a vibrant and interdisciplinary field that examines the legacy of colonialism and its ongoing impact on culture, politics, and identity. Scholars like Edward Said, Gayatri Spivak, and Homi K. Baha, drawing inspiration from Fanon, developed sophisticated critiques of colonialism, exploring its enduring effects on language, literature, and representation. Fanon's concept of the other became a central theme in post-colonial thought, highlighting how colonialism relied on the construction of binary oppositions: civilized versus savage, modern versus primitive, rational versus emotional, to justify its dominance. Post-colonial scholars building on Fanon's work examined how these artificial divisions continue to shape our understanding of the world, often perpetuating inequalities and reinforcing power imbalances. Fanon's analysis of the psychological impact of colonialism also proved deeply influential in post-colonial thought. Scholars like Albert Memmi and Ngugi wa Thiong'o explored the themes of alienation, identity crisis, and the struggle for cultural authenticity in their own work, drawing on Fanon's insights into the dehumanizing effects of colonial subjugation. Fanon's work remains a touchstone for post-colonial scholars, providing a rich source of insight into the complexities of power, identity, and representation in a world shaped by the legacies of empire. His ideas continue to challenge and provoke, inspiring new generations of scholars to critically examine the past and to imagine new possibilities for the future. Fanon's influence extended beyond the academy, resonating deeply with activists and organizers involved in the civil rights movement and subsequent struggles for racial justice. His call for Black liberation, his analysis of the psychological impact of racism, and his emphasis on the need for collective action found fertile ground in the Black communities of the United States and beyond. Martin Luther King Jr., while not directly influenced by Fanon, shared his concern with the dehumanizing effects of racism and the need for a fundamental transformation of society. Fanon's more radical pronouncements on violence, however, resonated with activists like Malcolm X and the Black Panther Party, who saw armed struggle as a necessary response to the systemic violence faced by Black people. Fanon's ideas continued to shape discussions around race and racism in the decades following the Civil Rights Movement. His work informed the development of critical race theory, a body of scholarship that examines the pervasive nature of racism and its intersection with other forms of oppression. His analysis of internalized racism and the psychological impact of living under white supremacy continues to resonate with activists and scholars alike. Fanon's legacy is evident in contemporary movements for racial justice, such as Black Lives Matter, which draws inspiration from his analysis of systemic racism and his call for radical social change. His work serves as a reminder that the struggle for racial equality is far from over, and that achieving true justice requires a fundamental dismantling of the structures of power and privilege that perpetuate inequality. In the 21st century, Fanon's work remains as relevant and urgent as ever. The legacies of colonialism continue to shape global power dynamics, while racism, xenophobia, and other forms of intolerance continue to plague societies around the world. Fanon's insights into the psychological and social mechanisms of oppression provide invaluable tools for understanding and challenging these persistent injustices. His emphasis on the importance of decolonizing the mind, of freeing ourselves from the mental chains of internalized oppression, remains a powerful call to action for individuals and communities seeking to create a more just and equitable world. Fanon's work reminds us that the struggle for liberation is not just about changing laws or policies, but also about transforming ourselves and our relationships with one another. As we grapple with the challenges of our time, from climate change to economic inequality to the rise of authoritarianism, Fanon's legacy offers a potent reminder that true progress requires a radical reimagining of our world. His work encourages us to question assumptions, challenge power structures, and embrace a vision of humanity rooted in justice, equality, and mutual respect. Fanon's legacy is not a static monument to the past, but a living, breathing force that continues to inspire and challenge us to create a better future. His words continue to resonate with those who dare to dream of a world free from oppression, a world where all people are valued, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential. Fanon's call to action remains as urgent today as it was over half a century ago. To recognize our shared humanity, to challenge injustice wherever we see it, and to never stop fighting for a more just and equitable world. Frantz Fanon's life was tragically cut short at 36, but his ideas have continued to shape intellectual thought and inspire social movements. He challenged us to confront the legacies of colonialism, racism, and oppression. His work remains a beacon of hope and a call to action for a just world. Fanon's legacy spans psychiatry, philosophy, political theory, and cultural critique. He recognized the interconnectedness of mind, body, and society. True liberation required dismantling oppressive structures and healing psychological wounds. His analysis of the psychological impact of colonialism revolutionized our understanding. Fanon showed how the colonized internalized messages of inferiority. His work was deeply rooted in the lived experiences of those struggling against oppression. He wrote from the front lines of the Algerian War of Independence, witnessing the brutality of colonialism and the resilience of the human spirit. His writing resonated deeply with those fighting for liberation worldwide. Despite being written over half a century ago, Fanon's work remains strikingly relevant today. Colonial legacies shape global power dynamics, influencing trade policies and cultural representations. Racism and xenophobia persist, fueled by fear and ignorance. Fanon's analysis of psychological oppression helps us understand these challenges. His work reveals how power operates through subtle manipulation and exclusion. Fanon's insights into oppression and inequality remain relevant. His legacy reminds us the struggle for justice is ongoing. Fanon's work was not merely about understanding the world, it was about changing it. He believed that true liberation required action, both individual and collective. He called upon the colonized to reject their assigned roles as passive victims and to seize their own destinies, forging new paths towards freedom and self-determination. His call to action resonates deeply in our current moment as we face a multitude of interconnected crises, from climate change to economic inequality to the rise of authoritarianism. These challenges demand bold solutions, collective action, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Fanon's work reminds us that true change requires more than just tinkering with existing systems. It demands a fundamental transformation of our values, our institutions, and our relationships with one another. It requires us to imagine and create a world that is radically different from the one we inherited. A world where justice, equality, and human dignity are not aspirations, but lived realities. This call to action is not limited to those who have directly experienced the brunt of oppression. It is a call to all who believe in a more just and equitable world to those who recognize that our destinies are interconnected and that the liberation of one is bound up with the liberation of all. Fanon's work challenges us to confront our own complicity in systems of oppression, to examine our own biases and privileges, and to use our voices and actions to create a more just and equitable world for all. Despite the weight of the issues he tackled, Fanon's work is ultimately a message of hope. He believed in the resilience of the human spirit and our capacity for growth and transformation. Fanon envisioned a world where the psychological scars of colonialism and racism had healed. His vision of a decolonized future is a tangible goal, requiring ongoing struggle and commitment. It is a future where diversity is celebrated, not feared, and where all people have the opportunity to thrive. Fanon's legacy offers a beacon of hope, reminding us that another world is possible. A world where the chains of oppression have been broken and the human spirit soars free.